Hi, Robin. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So, to get started, I'd like to talk about your climb, your journey, essentially how you got here.
That's is very it's a long story. I'm old. But I won't make it long. My journey is I when people ask me how did I end up doing what I'm doing today, I liken it to walking. So walking is actually just falling forward. Right? You fall forward, and one foot catches you from falling down, and then the next foot catches you from falling down as you lean forward. And I feel like that's been my life. I lean forward and I walk. And I'm a real advocate of goal setting and objective setting, and I think it's really important. And I don't think I actually live my life that way unnecessarily. I don't think that I had ideas in my head of I want to go after this thing, and I maniacally focused and went after it. Instead, I kind of just walked along the way and made decisions at each intersection about going left or right or straight ahead based on what felt best at that time, and where I felt confidence. And as I look back, I wouldn't say I have any regrets because I'm happy where I am. So I figure if I have regrets about where I was, if I could do anything over, I wouldn't be where I am. And I'm happy where I am. So I have no regrets about the decisions that I made, but I would have done some things differently than I did. Um, uh, I came out of college and wanted to be a school teacher. I went into college thinking I wanted to be a speech therapist, came out of college, wanted to be a school teacher. And I went to an Ivy League school. My father was so disappointed that I was going to be a school teacher. And, his Ivy League daughter, and she was going to teach school. But it felt right to me. And it was also by accident that I ended up doing that. But I came out of college and I got married a year after I came out of college, because I met my husband the first week of school freshman year. So we were together from the very beginning, and then his mom passed away. Well, his mom passed away after we got married, but it just made sense for us to get married right out of college. And his mom passed away shortly after we were married, and so we decided to have kids sooner than we expected to, because we kind of felt like, wow, life was pretty fleeting. And so we had kids. I was very young when I had my kids in my 20s. So I stopped working for a little bit, but I never stopped needing to be with grown-ups and have adult conversations. So I got really involved in volunteer work. And I got more out of the volunteer work, I think, than I ever put in. Although I did a lot. I mean, I ran organizations. I was president of several different organizations, including the Jewish Federation of Greater Seattle, which is a big lift. I learned a lot. I learned how to read spreadsheets. I learned how to so for all the people out there that are thinking, you know what, I'm not working right now, volunteer work is a way to stay very, very current and learn a whole lot about business. I learned how to read P&L statements. I learned how to write budgets. Nothing that I ever learned as a teacher. I learned how to run a meeting. I learned parliamentary procedure. I learned how to manage discontent in the community and help all voices be heard. So all of that. But I also felt like I wanted to work. And so when my youngest daughter was in kindergarten, I heard about this opportunity to be a trainer for Western Washington University. They were going to be doing diversity training. And I was involved in a social justice organization. So diversity training, which is what we used to call it. At that time, that sounded interesting to me. And I was an educator, so adult education. How different could that be? Very different, by the way. But so I applied for this job, and I was in a pool of 40 trainers that got hired. And for 10 years, I did mandatory diversity training for the state of Washington, which was not so well received necessarily all the time by the workers that were there. But we started at 40 trainers. We ended up 4 trainers at the end of 10 years. I stayed the whole time, and I learned just a ton about the world, about racism, about adult education. And when that contract ended, I went to work for the Seattle Police Department, for the city of Seattle, and then the Seattle Police Department, doing a bunch of stuff on youth violence. And then I ended up training police officers, doing ethics training for recruits. So, all these doors opened, and I kind of just walked through to see what it would be like. And there I was, and I stayed there for 6 years. And I ran a police academy for communities to learn about police. And I'm a pretty liberal Democrat, so this was a big, heavy learning curve for me to be engaged in and embedded in a police and paramilitary organization. And I loved the people that I worked with, both sworn and civilian. I learned a ton. That ended when the chief changed. It didn't feel as good for me. And my husband said, "Why don't you work in the private sector and earn some money?" So, because the public sector obviously is not as lucrative for the people who work there. So I went to work with him and brought the skills that I had around, org design and human resources, training, facilitation, helping people think things through well. I brought that into the for-profit world, into our business, Mercer Island Group. And I've been doing that. Oh God, I don't even know how long now. But a long time. Now I'm working with companies, helping them market themselves better, design their organizational teams inside their organizations, think through roadmaps, bring agencies and clients together, kind of that matchmaking, which I love to do. And then also helping agencies figure out how to win more business and present themselves well to clients. So it actually it's all intersecting. Everything I did leads to the next thing. I think this will be the last stop. And I mean, I'm lucky. I work with my husband every day, and he's my best friend, and we get along really well, and we have very complementary skills. And I get up every day and look forward to what I'm going to do. So for now, this is kind of where I am, and I see this taking me to the end, whatever that looks like.
That was
So
very
that's the
thorough. I
journey.
love that. That was a great explanation. So
Yeah, it's kind of just happened.
I've
This is
seen,
the, yeah.
oh, no, please continue.
I say this advice I would never give anyone is to just let it happen. But I would say that there is something to be learned in uh, rather than going after what you think you should go after, also recognizing that you can make really great stuff out of what you have. I mean, I wanted to be a mom that was close to her kids. I needed to do other stuff. I was not good at just being a stay-at-home mom. It was not enough for me. I had to talk to grown-ups and I had to think about things. So I did that through volunteer work. And there are lots of times when I mean, I spent a lot of hours that I could have been earning money, but I had flexibility, and flexibility was really important to me. So I could pick up my kids from school or drive them to their voice lesson or their piano lesson or their gym class or whatever they were taking. I wanted that. So, was it what I thought I'd be when I was, 18 and I was going to, change the world? It wasn't what I thought it would be. How it would turn out, but I always took what I had around me and figured out how to take that to go to the next place. And I just kind of jumped on opportunities as they came.
I
And
think,
that advice I would give.
yeah, and I notice a lot of people that are successful, whether it's in the agency space or any other, are those that have a very different background of how they got to their point of success, right? Not that you weren't successful in any of those other endeavors, but I think it's just, I mean, it's just you need a very diverse background that's going to give you a stronger viewpoint. And I'm one of those people too, that I think it's very important to look at the objectives and, to be goal oriented, but that openness to be able to move and pivot and be flexible throughout life to figure out where you go in your journey, I think is one of the beautiful things about life.
Yeah, and I had to learn it too because I'm a control freak. I gotta just say, I like to control everything around me and have it just right. Um, and learning to let go of certain things to enable me to be able to do other things. Actually, I'm old enough now to look back and say that at each time I did that, it opened and unlocked a little something, a little potential that I didn't know I had. Trying something new. There are some things I wish I would have tried. I had opportunities that and this kind of my own internalized sexism. I didn't think I was qualified. And then when I saw who got that position, it was like, yeah, so I definitely could have done that. But but that's also just part of the journey, right? And so it helps me. I have a very strong desire to mentor young women in business, because I didn't have, I had one really strong mentor in my life, and she wasn't even that much older than I was, but she was more accomplished in the field that we were working in, and she gave me great advice, and I learned a ton from her. And I think and it's different hearing it from a woman because she understands the navigation roads for women. They are different. Women are not expected to, when women are assertive, they're considered aggressive. It's just, and I'm a pretty assertive person. So I've been called aggressive a lot in my life. And sometimes maybe I was, but most often I was being assertive, and it was unfamiliar to a lot of my coworkers or my colleagues or my bosses or people around me. So other women help me understand how to navigate that, right? So I like to do that with other women.
What was the best piece of advice she gave you?
The best piece of advice she ever gave me was that sometimes you have to be strategic in choosing where and how you stand up for the things that matter most to you. That you don't have to say everything you think, which is really actually, if you just let that sit for a minute, that's pretty great advice. And that you're not giving up. I always said to her, if I don't say what I think, then I'm not being genuine. And she said, being strategic is not being disingenuous. Being a strategic is figuring out how to take your genuineness in a way people can hear you. And that was the best advice I ever had.
It's good advice. And then how did
Yeah.
you learn to be more open to the changes in your life and taking that path?
It's a really good question. I don't know that I can think and identify how I learned it. I tried it, and I saw that it worked. And I wanted to be more open. I always had the desire to be more open, but I also wanted to prove I was right. And those things are polar out. I mean, those things hit really hard together. So I found people around me who I really admired, who were really open, but I also knew were really strong, really ethical, really genuine in who they were, authentic people. And I watched how they did it. And that's how I did it, actually. That's how I learned it, by watching other people that I really admired and thinking, I want to be like that. So, and I'm not ashamed to say that I aspire to be like other people that I admire. And I pick pieces of people that I admired along my journey, and I worked hard to be them. I remember seeing someone speak publicly without notes. Just, I mean, it was a long time ago. I do it now all the time, obviously, but she got up an authority on a really hard subject, and she just no notes. It was like, okay, I gotta learn how to do that. But that's something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's how I did it. I kind of just found the things I wanted to be, and I set out to be them.
Like Steve Banner in the 4 minute mile or whatever that number is. And I don't even know if I got that guy's name right, but when you see somebody and you think, and you know it's possible, then you're like, okay, cool. I can do that too.
Yeah.
I can do that too.
Yeah, I would never pick the 4 minute mile, but yes. But yeah, I mean, I would see women who were like, she's not so different from me. She's accomplished. There's a lot that she did to get to where she is, but I want to be like that. That's what I want to be like. I want people to, I want people to see me that way. I want to be able to be that. And so I worked at it. I worked really hard at it.
Let's
And
jump
I
to
just,
the,
yeah.
oh, sorry. Did you have another point to that?
No, I'm just thinking out loud.
No, no, I love it. Yeah. So the matchmaking, I want to talk a little bit about, what it is that you do. Can you say more about what that means and what that looks like?
Yeah, so one of the things that we do is clients come to us and say, hey, I need a new advertising agency. I need a new social agency. I need a new PR agency. And so what we do is we get to know a lot about the company, a lot about the marketing team, a lot about the team that's going to work with that agency. And then we sort through and file through and assess tons and tons of agencies, 50 agencies. It depends on, if it's advertising, it's more than 50. If it's media, probably around 50. It's social agencies, it's probably 35 or 40, depending upon how big and broad the field is. And we look and see who's the best match. And so I call it matchmaking, because what we do actually is we come in and we set up a dating system. If I take the metaphor all the way through, and representing the client, the person who's looking for a partner, we then bring in viable candidates that are eager to meet this partner and think that they would be the right match. And so we do all the vetting, and we create the process to help the client assess, okay, so of these 10, let's make a short list of people we want to meet. And then we set up meetings and opportunities for them to get to know each other better. I mean, just staying with that dating metaphor, that's really what we do, is we set up the process, we facilitate the process to help the agency show itself the best that they can, and the client to be able to assess the best of the agency. Because what's really heartbreaking is when an agency that should be able to win a piece of business loses because they pitch poorly. That's just a heartbreaking situation. So we try to help the agencies, present themselves in the very best light that they can.
Do you tell your clients not to kiss on the first date?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. We like to do it gradually because what happens is, agencies want to sell themselves really fast. They want to show themselves off, oh my God, I mean, we've got asked in. So let's tell them how great we are. And that is the biggest turnoff ever to a client. Because what the client, think about dating. If you just think about dating, it can help you understand exactly how this all works. When a client meets an agency, what the agency should be thinking is, so why are they looking for an agency? And actually, that's the first question that you should always ask. If you're an agency, if you get approached by a client or by a search consultant like me, the first question you should ask is, why are you looking for an agency right now? So, what you want, because then you'll have an understanding of what is the problem that needs to be solved by an agency. Nobody wants to pay for marketing. It's, no company wants to pay for marketing. It's always a budget that gets cut fast and first. We'll just spend a little less in media. What could happen? Right. So marketing has to deliver on business goals and objectives. And so if you think about what does an agency do, an agency helps a marketing team or a CMO, in many cases, figure out how marketing is going to deliver on business goals and objectives. So if the agency doesn't understand what marketing's role is in the business, the agency is just a me too, right? So if every agency comes in and just presents their capabilities, honest to God, it's a sea of sameness. But who stands out for me, like if I'm looking for a partner, who stands out for me is who I believe is going to best help me meet my goals. Who's going to get in the foxhole with me and figure out all the gnarly stuff that we need to do to be able to impress the C-suite, impress the owner. Who's going to get in the foxhole with me and figure out strategically, how do we get more traffic into our stores or onto our website? Who's going to get in the foxhole with me and help me figure out how we just sell more stuff, right? That's what I want if I'm the client. I want a partner who's going to solve the business issues. I'm going to assume that if I'm talking to you, you have certain capabilities, or I wouldn't be talking to you already. And when the time comes, I'm going to ask you about how you do what you do. But first, you have to convince me that you actually could partner with me by showing me that you understand my industry and you understand my target audience, and you understand my business. Then we'll have a conversation about you.
So let's say, like, what does the process look like? Because I'd like to understand, like, what that first date should be. Is that first date, talking about them? Like, there's already background research. Can you talk to me, like, kind of what that cadence
Yeah.
looks
So if it's a formal search like what we do, it's and I can talk about that. Let's just talk about that. It's different if you as an agency are meeting a client for the first time. So we'll set that aside for a minute. But if you're doing it through a search consultant like us, or even a procurement-driven review, because search consultants only run about 25%, I think, of all reviews in a year. The rest are run by the company themselves. So so if you get approached to say, hey, we're looking for a new agency, first up for us, right? what we look for, we do the research in advance. So we will have been through your website. I mean, we know a lot of agencies already, but we always do original research every time because, or desk research, I should say, because there's always changes in the agency world. This one's out of business. This one merged with this one. This one got acquired, right? There's a new player in town, or, you know, the talent from this agency went out and formed their own agency. So this agency is not so good anymore, whatever that, it's very fluid. So we always check to see what's going on. And we also want to know who are current clients, because there are also conflicts, right? So if I'm representing, for instance, Nike, which I'm not, but if I were, I then could not bring in an agency that represented Adidas or Puma or any of the competitors, right? So we have to know who these agencies are working with, what capabilities they have. We look for case studies on websites. And then we also know a lot of agencies, right? But in all the agencies, the hundreds of agencies that I actually know, I still check, because things change. Like last time I worked with this agency, oh, that executive creative director is gone. Let me see what the creative looks like today, right? Because I can't recommend the creative the way it was when it was a different ECD. Maybe it's better, maybe it's worse, that kind of thing. They have a new chief strategy officer. Okay, so maybe these guys actually do strategy now. They didn't used to, right? So what does that look like? So we do all that homework, and we bring to our client a list of agencies that are vetted and scored against the needs assessment that we write for them. So the first date essentially is us reaching out, asking you to sign an NDA, so that before we tell you who the client is, you sign the NDA with us, you sign the NDA, and we say, hey, company X is looking for a media agency or whatever kind of agency you might be. And we're running a review. And we tell you a little bit about the company, why they're looking for an agency, and we give you what's called an RFI, request for information, which is essentially asking about your capabilities, your size, what clients have you won and lost. But most importantly, we ask you for case studies, specific case studies that give you a sense of what the business challenge is. So show me a case study where you did a kick-ass product launch, because this client's going to be launching new products. And show us the results. Show me a case study where you were able to create differentiation in a very competitive field, because maybe it's a telecom company. I mean, they all sound the same, right? So show me or grocery. Show me how a very competitive field, whatever that might be. So we ask for case studies. It's really interesting because we send these out, right? We ask some agencies to respond, are you interested, in 24 hours? And I would say, if we ask 10 agencies, 9 of them don't call us. They just respond yes or no. 1 will call and say, so, are you guys willing to answer some questions? Of course we're willing to answer questions. So my favorite question is, are these nice people on the client side? There's one agency that always asks me that question. Is the client nice? Always. Which I think is like, okay, yeah, they only want to work with nice people. So
I love that.
yeah. They also ask, so how big is the budget, which is very legitimate. Or they might ask, why are they looking for a new agency right now? Who are the decision makers? What's going to be most important to them? One of my other favorite questions is, why are they looking at us? What is it about us that have them interested in us? So we go on. Now we have our 10. They send in their responses. We grade those. We score them, and then 4 are chosen to move forward. Those 4 sign an NDA with the client. And then we send a request for a proposal, which will be a presentation. In today's world, it's a Zoom presentation. They used to be in person. They will be again sometime soon, I hope. And it's usually a business challenge of some kind, like we're getting ready for holiday, and here's all the parameters, and then they're going to share files with you. And so they'll give you a business challenge of some sort. We set up a Q&A call, an hour with each agency. We also try to do what we call a tissue session, which is essentially a second session where the agency can present their early strategic thinking or even some early creative ideas. And then there's the presentation itself. So there's a little bit of dating that happens along the way. The Q&A is one, the tissue session is another, and then the presentation is the big date, right? It's the prom. where you come in and you get a chance to meet in person. Now, in pre-COVID world, we would then choose final two and go visit the agencies in their space to get
Mm.
to understand kind of how they work and what it feels like. And but we don't get to do that anymore. So we usually do a follow-up on Zoom. So kind of like a final date with the final two, and then a decision gets made.
What do you do with the 9 that just answer yes? Like, would they have sales prevention departments? I don't understand why they're not as involved.
Well, I mean, they answer yes, and then they get the RFI and they write an RFI, and sometimes it's great and sometimes it's not. Um, I mean, there's nothing I can do. I mean, when they're done, and sometimes some of the people who don't ask questions do get into the final four. I just don't understand why you wouldn't ask questions. Why wouldn't you ask questions? So if you're only thinking about how are we going to present ourselves, I guess you don't need to ask any questions, right? So if you're thinking about, I don't understand anything about this business, I need to ask some questions. I don't know how you could write, an RFI without asking any. Sometimes they will send us a few emails. That's fine too, and that works. But we'll often say after the 10 come through and we choose 4, we will offer a full debrief to the 6 that didn't make it. And we'll say, hey, you guys didn't talk about the client in your RFI anywhere. Well, you didn't ask us to talk about the client. It's like, okay, so this is about the client. So we didn't ask you how you solve any of their problems, but we did ask you to talk about your capabilities in a way that's relevant to this client. And you just sent us a canned response. Well, we didn't know enough. Well, we were wondering why you didn't call and ask questions. So we actually do help. We try to help. We know it takes a lot of time to write these. And so we like to spend time with agencies afterwards and say, so we think you could, especially when I'm so disappointed, an agency that we scored really high, and then they come in like number 9 out of 10. It's like, so what happened, you guys? This really wasn't your best day. So let's talk about how you could do a better job next time.
Let's talk about that. So what you help agencies, you've seen tons of pitches, you help agencies pitch. Where do agencies typically fail and how can they pitch better?
Yeah. So the first and foremost, this is not about you. I know it feels like it is, right? Because you, especially if it's a client that you've coveted. Oh my God, they invited us to talk to them, and that happens sometimes. Like agencies they've been courting a client, and then the client will say to us, "Hey, we keep hearing from agency X. Maybe we should include them." We take a look. Sometimes it's like, yeah, you shouldn't because they don't have what you need. And other times, like, yeah, actually, they might work for you. And then so we send the RFI, and they're like, oh my God. And so they get so excited. It's like, okay, we're going to just put on a show about us. So they can't resist us. And it's like, so no one cares about you. They care about themselves. The client wants to know how you're the smartest people in the room that they're going to ever see. And those big brains of yours are going to help them figure out their business challenges, and then use that to create white space for them against their competition that's really relevant to their target audience and really on brand, and help them shine in a way that separates them from the pack. That's what they all want. Well, you have to show them how you think about them to do that. You can't just say, and we did great work for Southwest Airlines. And okay, good. But my product is nothing like Southwest Airlines. There are some case studies, everybody has done work for Target in the entire country. And Nike too, by the way. And a little bit of Coca-Cola. So show me what you've done for brands that are relevant to mine, and relevant meaning not necessarily in my industry, which is helpful but not required, but that have solved the same problem I've solved. We're a challenger brand. How have you helped a challenger brand separate itself from the pack and get closer to the top 3? And the RFI tells you everything you need to know about what they're trying to solve. So even in your request for information, show me in a written response, show me, we're thinking about your business, even from the start. And so we're going to show you case studies, and here's why they're relevant. That's a really good trick, by the way. Don't just put case studies in. Choose case studies that are relevant because you solve the same problem. and then tell me why I'm reading this case study. We included this case study because, like you, this company had this issue, blah, 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 and here's how we approached it, right? That's helpful. Clients, all these come in, they all look alike, they all look the same. And clients have to figure out which ones to choose, right? So if you can tell a story about your own agency in a request for information that's relevant to them, just put the stones. I always say it's like making a path, right? So put the stones really close together, because as soon as there's any space between the stones, before they step to the next one, they might wander off and start thinking about what they want to think about. And you want to help them think about what you want them to think about. So as you write that RFI, what is the one big takeaway you want this client to take away? So when they read our RFI, we want them to know that we are the agency that is most likely to be able to actually do what they need done. They need to increase traffic, or they need to rebrand, or they need to drive store sales or market share, or there's always something. And if you don't know what that something is, you can't drive towards it. You have to have a target to go after. So that's why I don't understand why people don't ask questions, but you can also do desk research on the company and find out what you need to know about kind of what's going on for them. But those are some tricks and tips, I guess.
I find it alarming that agencies don't take that initiative to get a deep understanding. It sounds like that, what is it, coming from a place of arrogance or fear?
I don't think it's arrogance. I mean, in some cases it's arrogance, but that's more rare. That's more rare. I mean, there are agencies that are arrogant. Wieden Kennedy's an arrogant agency, I'd say. They've earned the right to be arrogant. It's not everyone's cup of tea. And they are pretty much going to bring you a creative they think you should run. But that's Wieden Kennedy, right? So, but most agencies are not arrogant. And then when you deal with the people at Wieden, it's not the same. It's just, it's an aura about them, I suppose. But I think in some cases, it's lack of time. These things take a while to do, and it takes resources, and agencies are not staffed for new business to be able to pull people off to write RFIs and to do pitch decks and to get up and present and practice for weeks in advance and make sure it's all perfect. The agency staffing model doesn't allow for you to have people that are sitting around waiting for new business to come in and, oh, we'll jump on that RFI. That's just not how agencies are staffed. Clients don't understand that, but we do. And so we know that when if you've got 5 people working on any kind of new business pitch, they're also working on probably 5 clients. So in one form or another, whether they're running media for them, or they're doing creative for them, or that you're the account director on that, or yours is doing strategy for our client as well. So we know that. Our advice to agencies is, if you can't really put in a great showing, say no. Say no. If you go to win, and put everything in that you need, and choose your team to work on the pitch and make sure that they understand this is nights and weekends. And we're going to do everything we can to win it. And it's going to be extra time. It's on top of your regular workload, or if we can move some of your workload off, that's fine. But don't do this and think, all right, I remember one agency said, hey, we didn't put it, an agency that should have really been in the Final Four. They wrote a terrible RFI. It had nothing strategic in it at all. And you wouldn't even have known it was like a canned response, a canned deck. And I called it, I said, so what happened here? They said, well, we were saving the strategy for the presentation. I said, well, you're not getting another date, ma'am. You can save your best dress. Come ready to go at every single step along the way, because other people are. Other agencies will come ready to show well. So my advice to agencies is, if you're in it, be in it to win it. Go all in.
Don't hold anything back.
Nothing back. Put in the extra time and show that you can think about their business right from the start.
So an RFI response, you mentioned deck. You send over, questions in a Word doc? What's the expectation that you would like to see returned?
So we usually get a PowerPoint deck back that has all the sections. It's not like procurement driven RFPs, RFIs are usually more prescriptive. I always say to any agency, when you get an RFI, if you're thinking, you know what, I don't want to do it in the order that they sent it, because it starts out with all the boring stuff. Ask, do we have to follow the order of your deck, of your questions? If they say yes, then you have to. But like what we say is, here's what we want to know, send it to us. I don't care what the order is. I don't care if the case studies can be first. I don't care. Just make sure everything I asked is in there. So, and then at the back could be all the, how big are you? What clients did you win and lose? That kind of thing. Capabilities, that stuff, right? So, however you want to do it. So it's usually a deck. It ranges anywhere from, I'd say, depending upon their ask, anywhere from 65 to 110 slides, I'd say, depending on the agency. We had one once, it was 187 slides. Now that agency ended up winning that piece of business. I'll just say this, but I called the biz dev director afterwards. I said, don't do that again. Like, that's too much. Like, I'm hired to read them. I have to read all those pages. Like, and honestly, here's the problem. When you're writing these, remember, so a search consultant's going to read them. We're going to read every page, but the client's also getting them, right? You care more about the client thinks than what I think. I'm influential, but it's their decision. If they're getting 10, you think they're going to read 10 RFIs that are each over 100 slides, every slide? They're not. They're not. They're not. So when you write 187 slides, you're giving them the choice of which slides to read. And you're giving up control. So control the message. Put the stones close together. Make it so that it's easy for them to follow your story. Answer all the questions that I asked. Put the questions into a story. Tell the story of how you would solve their problem, even in the capabilities deck, right? Your capabilities are relevant if they solve their problem. Everybody has the same capabilities. I know every agency thinks, well, we have secret sauce. I don't ever want to hear that again. We also have trademarked. We're the only one. It's okay. Nobody cares. Everyone has the same capabilities. Show me how you'd use them for me. That's what I care about.
Would you say so? And based on those capabilities, how they would use those for you is a mix between the case studies and their fresh ideas that they're applying to this problem.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in some cases, you have to explain how you do. Here's our media planning and buying. Here is the technology that we use. Okay, fine. Don't call it out as proprietary. Okay. Everybody has a proprietary process, but it's the same. I just want to know what the process is. Don't use all the words. And by the way, I also, when I see all this flashy stuff, I'm wondering, how expensive are these guys? Oh. So would we, like, they know our budget is X. How much of that stuff would be extra? And so be careful how you put yourself out there as too elite, too everything we have is a la carte. Okay, now I'm getting nervous. I'm coming in for buffet.
Right.
I want a little something of everything that you guys offer. So remember who you're writing for. The agencies do this for their clients all day long, every day. You help take communications to a target audience in a way that, it's either, if you're doing media, it's where the client is, right? You want to know where the target audience is. You buy it in the right place at the right time, right? The right media. If it's messaging, it's the right message for that target at the right time, in the right place, all of that, right? But when agencies talk about themselves to clients, they talk about themselves for themselves. You're writing this for an audience, so make it about them.
So now that they get selected based on the less than 187 page deck, what does that next stage look like? Is that where they're doing spec creative typically?
Typically, yes. So I know agencies hate to hear that. And someday maybe we won't have to have spec creative, and we don't require it. We never require it. We recommend that clients do not require it. But I will tell you that someone in the final four will do it. So clients are very literal. So if they can't see themselves in your ideas, it's harder for them to imagine themselves in your ideas and how you would bring ideas forward to them. One time I saw an agency that went all the way to the end with out doing spec creative at the RFP, that they did do it for the final visit because the client was not convinced. I saw an agency did not do spec creative that came in first place in the final 4 and did not get in the final 2 because the client was worried. They said, God, if we're only going to look at 2 finalists, what if these guys can't do the creative? You better choose 2 that can do creative. And it was heartbreaking because they should have been in the final 2. And I was like, oh man, you guys, what happened? So yeah, you need to be able to, you don't have to do a ton, bring a couple of ideas. So the final presentation is we give up business challenge, right? So let's say we did one recently for a grocery, and it was the business challenge was how would you literally how we have a new brand that we did a year ago, but we're not pulling it through into the store, into the sales. It's too high level. We need a tagline. We need communications that are going to be day to day and really work hard for us in terms of growing basket size and sales. So how would you take our current brand platform, and what are some ways that you would take it into a marketing campaign for us? All right. So if you don't want to do spec creative, that's going to be really hard to show. So, I mean, in that case, it's not just about showing spec creative. Here's the really most important part of an agency presentation, and that is the strategy. Strategy is what wins or loses. Because without strategy, the creative is sitting there out there all by itself, or the media plan is sitting out there all by itself, just floating. And one gust of wind and you're blown, you're done. So what the strategy does is it shows how you, the agency, have thought about their business and what is happening for the target audience, what's happening for the related to the competition, and what's true to the brand. And how do we create a space that's apart from the competition, but is true to the brand and is relevant to the target audience. And that should help us develop an insight. Here's where you can play. We believe we have an idea, not a creative idea, a strategic idea that can help you separate from the competition. And that idea is a strategic insight. You pull that forward. There's magic in presenting strategy. You pull that forward, and then you show, and we believe that this great insight can come to life the following way. Now, if you're going to do media, it comes to life in a media plan. If it's going to be creative, it comes to life through creative. It's going to be PR, it will come to life through your PR plans, maybe promotions or events or whatever the PR is going to look like. If it's going to be social, it's going to come to life through the way that you would run social for that. So depending upon what kind of agency you are, the front part stays the same. It's strategy. And that's where agencies win or lose, because in the meeting after the meeting, the client says, these guys really get us. I hated the creative, but these guys really get us. I think we can help them on the creative, because you wouldn't be in the room if they hated all the creative you've done in all your past. So even if you miss on the creative for them, they will probably give you a second chance on the creative. But the thinking, the strategy is everything.
And you have to gather that from your research, what you've done in the RFI, show that you understand, just scratch the surface of that, kernel of that strategy, apply creative to it if you can, to show you how you would articulate that in a creative.
Right, how would it come to life? Yep.
And then based on all those circumstances falling into place, your probability of winning is substantially higher than anybody else that misses one of those pieces.
Yeah, because almost everybody else will come in with hardly any strategy and just show slides and slides about themselves, which they start talking about themselves, which is I'm always a little confused by why an agency would do that. You are one of the final 4. How do you think you got there? They know about you already. So if I never hear again, well, enough about us, let's talk about you, I'd be happy. Because it was enough about you before you got here, because we already vetted you. That's why you're here. So if you want to put in somewhere in your deck a couple of slides about yourself for people who are in the room that might not know about you, somewhere in the middle or at the end, fine. But start out with the business challenge. That right away will differentiate you. That's number one. Do not talk about yourself in these meetings, but it's that evolution of the strategy that's going to be the differentiator. Many agencies come in, they spend 20 slides on themselves. I don't get it at all. Or 20 minutes on themselves, right? And then we talk about you, and it's, here's what you asked us for. Okay, I also know that. But okay, good review. Okay, here's what you asked us for. And then it's like, and here's the creative. Okay, so now it's only subjective, do I like the creative or not? Because I have no idea how you thought of it, why you thought of it, what it's going to do for us. Now I'm completely and totally, we just leapt over the entire Grand Canyon, no stones at all, no path. And I always believe that if you do great strategy, you should come in with 2 ideas. Now, if it's a media plan, it's 1 media plan, or maybe options, right? Here's how we do your media mix. Here are the markets we might go after, et cetera, and have some options, because the chance of being right it's very slim, because you only had a couple of dates. So you don't want to go all in on one idea, because then it's hard for them to pull back on the single idea. So we often recommend bring it 2 creative ideas and just don't pull all of them all the way through. You don't have to show me every execution. I don't need to see a door hanger, right? Show me how it would come to life, maybe in print, or depending on what the mediums are, that makes sense, right? Don't read a ton of scripts. It's boring as hell. You guys all laugh about them and you love them. Yeah, it's boring. Script reading is just boring.
Yeah, that's the cardinal sin. Yeah, you do not want to bore your audience in any way or any form.
Radio scripts, come on, put them in leave behinds, man. Yeah. But
So
video is helpful, and I'll tell you the best video you can do especially if you're a creative agency, but you can do this for media also, is what we call a manifesto video. So you finish your strategy rather, and you come up with this big idea, brilliant idea, right? And you're about to show creative. So before we show you the creative, we want to show you, give you a sense, a feeling of how we're going to bring this to life. Because the creative takes us from the head to the heart, right? That's what the creative is supposed to do. It's supposed to take you from rational to emotional. That's what creative, right, is supposed to do. And the emotional is what will, because it's based on good thinking, it will hopefully help me to do something, right? Because what marketing is supposed to do is to get a target audience to do more of something or to change their behavior. So you want me to do something that I've never done before, maybe to consider a vacation to Tucson, or maybe to consider a cruise. I've never cruised before. I'm never going to cruise. I'll never cruise. Oh, maybe I will. I'm going to look into it. That's what creative is supposed to do. So before we show you our some creative that we think could work for you, we want to give you a sense of the essence of where we're trying to go with creative. And you pull together a rip-o-matic, essentially. You pull together a spec video, and you can use any music you want, Justin Timberlake, anyone you want, because you're not selling anything here, right? You're not charging anybody anything. And you can use video from wherever you want. You can use video off their website. You can use video that you shoot or video that you have, right? And so someone on your team puts together this beautiful manifesto video with the perfect music. That absolutely now gives me goosebumps. And I will tell you that those manifesto videos are usually you just lock the door and you're in. So if the strategy is good, the manifesto video won't win if you don't have good strategy. Mm-hmm. The strategy is good. You lock me in that manifesto, because now I am with you. I am 100. Now we're simpatico, right? And then you show me the creative, whether I like it or not. I get what you're trying to do with it. And that emotion is the emotion I want for my brand. We'll figure out the creative later. Or sometimes the creative hits it really well. It's very close. but it's very hard to get there because you haven't really dated very much yet.
Yeah, and that's the strategy part. Like you barely dated. You're trying to predict how your spouse wants their future to look like based on that
Right.
first date, right? And then you want to put together and show them essentially how you would articulate that future in the video, hoping you get the songs right, hoping you get
Right.
their favorite colors in there, even though you know a little bit about their brand.
But that's why those Q&As and those tissue sessions are really important, because what are you asking in the Q&A? Don't ask questions like, how long will our presentation be? Don't ask those questions. Ask those to me in an email or call me up. Ask the client questions about their business. Ask them questions about what matters to them. Ask them questions about what's it like to work in your company? What's the culture of your company? Ask them questions about uh, work that's worked, work that they love, that's out there in the marketplace today, right? Ask them, get to know them as much as you can. Ask them what's been the hardest thing about reaching their target audience. You know, get to know as much as you can about what the problems are that really matter to them and how they've tried solving them and what's worked and what's not worked. And if you think about your business, if sometimes you get an entirely new team, right? Because and that's why they're looking for a new agency. So they don't know the business yet either. So what are the hardest things? So, figure out how you can connect with them on the things that matter, because that will help you design the future life, right? Like if I meet you and you agree to go on a date with me and I don't ask you if you like movies and I take you to the movies and you actually hate the movies, well, bad on me, I never asked. I take you for seafood and you're allergic, right? So it makes sense to ask a few questions before you design this beautiful future.
Now, when you're not involved, right, you have a very thorough process. And I also adore how attached you get to some of the agencies that don't win. That really shows that your heart is in it.
It is.
But let's say that there's not this process, you're not involved. What advice would you give to somebody that just gets the RFP sent to their email box, or somebody that
Yeah.
wants to participate in the brands that you're speaking to?
Yeah. So if you get a request for information, you get anything from any client or search consultant, whether it's procurement or the client, a marketer, the first thing to do is to say, "Oh, we are so interested. Can we hop on the phone um, uh, for 20 minutes, half an hour? We'd like to understand the ask a little bit better." And you put together those questions that you think you're going to need to know to be able to write a great RFI. So that's where you're going to ask all those questions. So why now? What are you hoping? A year from now, how will you know you chose the right agency? That's a really good question, right? What will the agency be doing? What are the business goals and objectives that the agency is on the hook to help deliver? That the marketing team is on the hook to help deliver. This is where you're going to ask all those questions about, have there been changes in the business? And you do your homework first, so you don't come in idiotic, right? You come in and you've done your homework and you say, "Hey, I noticed that you guys opened 20 new stores last year. Are there plans to open more this year?" Right? So that you actually sound like you have some intelligence, and you have questions that you're going to ask them, so that you, even in that Q&A, you're making an impression, whether it's to the procurement person or a marketer. The procurement people will talk to the marketers and say, "Hey, these guys were really smart on the phone," or they're going to say, "These guys were so rude." All that stuff gets translated. I remember one time we did a search and we had presentations, and when the last agency came in, just before they started, the CEO, I think it was, went out and talked to the receptionist. And he said, "Okay, I'd like you to tell me how the 4 agencies were out here." And he came back in the room and he said, "So I just want to share in the meeting after the meeting, right, when we were all done, the 4th agency had presented, and he said, "So I just want to give you guys something I learned. I went out and spoke to Anne, and here's what she shared. And one of the agencies had been really, really lovely. The others just came in, sat down. They weren't not nice, but one of them was really grateful. Thank you so much." And that agency won the business. That's not why they won the business, but just want to keep turning little things in your favor, right? And so
These little
all of those
nuances,
little things
right?
matter. Yeah.
Yeah,
right?
thanking the waiter when they dropped off the food. Something as
Right.
subtle as that could be the signals that are going to help solidify and beat you out.
Yeah, right. It tells you a little bit about, this is all like if you were dating someone, wouldn't you want to know what they were like to the help, to people that they thought weren't important,
Is
all of
there
that.
number that agencies should be aware of when they get an RFP? For instance, one of the questions I always ask is how many other people are in the running for this? Do you have
It's a
any?
legitimate question. It's a legitimate question. And the reason it's a legitimate question is because if it's a Cal call, oh, we're extended to 20 agencies, don't do it. 10 is 10, 11, 12. 10 is the best number. We like 10 in the first round. We're looking at 10. That's fair. I mean, that's fair to the client. If they're looking at 20 agencies, I wouldn't do it. That's a cattle call. That means they didn't do any work vetting. You have no idea why they chose you. You're just on a list. I wouldn't do it. If they got down to 10, there have to be reasons why they chose those 10. Because it's a big world of agencies out there. So if they narrowed it to 10, there's a reason why you're on it, and that's what you want to know.
And how do you feel about them requesting for you to send over your proposal, your presentation without you controlling that presentation?
Well, you don't have a choice usually, right? So if they, if there's a submission, I often see this where they ask for everything in the first round. Like they want to know all, they want to do the capabilities, but they also want you to, how would you solve this? And by the way, could you price it also? Um, you have to send it, and that's that. And then they're going to choose which ones. And then what they do is rather than have you prepare another one, they just want you to present from your slides. And that's an interesting place to be. So if that happens and you send everything in and then they want to see you after, my recommendation, and I still always have ask for a Q&A session. The worst is they say no. I will always say to people, you're 100% more likely to get an answer to something you ask than something you never ask. Can we have a half an hour for questions? No. Okay. But if you never ask, you're never getting a yes, right? They're not going to offer it up if you don't ask. And most will say, sure, yeah, we'll hop on the phone with you. Okay. So now they say, okay, we're going to want you to present from your slides. Now you sent them, let's say 80 slides, and you've got, an hour to present, including 15 minutes of Q&A. Okay, 80 slides. What do I do? So you call and you say, or your email, and you say, so do they have to be slides from the deck? Or we've actually done some additional thinking. Can we bring some new thinking? Now, if they say yes, you are home free and you can create your deck for this, which is going to be all strategy and solutions, right? That come from the strategy, and you are home free to do something fabulous. If they say no, then you say, well, can we create a mini deck from that deck and pull some of the slides because we can't talk about all of them. Usually they'll say yes to that. And then you pull the slides that are going to be how you tell the story, and your voiceover will have to be the emphasis of it, right? Will be where you're going to tell your story, tell the strategy story that leads to your creative and so on. I would never send a manifesto video in a deck. I just don't think it works. And I would ask, can we bring an additional video that we've created? And if they say no, it's no, but, or don't ask and just ask for forgiveness rather than permission.
Yeah, I think
The video.
controlling the presentation from the agency's behalf, in my perspective, is always the best scenario because you can diminish cynicism. You can really read the responses and then do a follow up. When you don't
Yeah.
have that, it's frightening because you're just, I don't
Yeah.
know, we're just going to shoot this thing off and hope and pray.
Right. But I mean, if you've had a chance to have at least one conversation, it doesn't feel quite as risky, right? You want to, this is entirely an exercise in minimizing your risk. I mean, that's what this is. Do everything you can to minimize your risk. Because you don't want to mismatch, right? You don't want to say something and, oh, if I only asked, I would know that they hate green or whatever, right? So like ask, are we beholding to the color palette? Can we look at other colors? No, stay on brand. right? So those are all things to ask before you go do them.
Right. Smart. Now, when you're selecting in consulting with companies to select agencies and you're putting in your list of 10 or 12, how do you feel about these super focused agencies? Let's say that all they do is hotels, all they do is hot air balloon companies,
Yep.
so on and so forth. Where do they fall in your selection?
Well, it depends on what we're looking for, right? So if we're doing some work for a toy company right now. So yeah, I love agencies that are focused on toy companies. The problem is they're all conflicted. So I'll look there. I'll look at agencies that are focused on particular verticals. Um, and if they don't have anyone right now on their roster who's conflicted, that's kind of like the holy grail. That's fabulous. Someone who really understands the industry, who really knows the space. And yes, we'll be very interested in them. But the problem is that often in a vertical, you're conflicted. Now, there are some verticals that are less conflicted than others, right? So like colleges and community colleges, that's a pretty unconflicted space because they're all so geographically, as long as you're not coming in with one that's in the same exact geography, that would be conflicted because you're pulling from the same students. There might be conflicts there, but there are some verticals like health verticals. Hey, if you're not, if my clients in the diabetes space, and you guys have done a lot of work with similar either drugs or medical devices that are similar in terms of getting to the consumer or getting to the medical professionals. If you don't have anyone in that space right now, then you're very definitely in consideration.
Got it. Now, I know we're almost coming at time here, so I want to make sure I get all my questions answered in here, and I can edit this part out. So 1 second. So I guess the
Okay.
main thing for the next question, I got just a few more. I want to be respectful of your time. What are agencies doing wrong now? Is it their websites and the way that they present themselves? Does it make it easy for you to select? Is it, I know there some of them are pitching like clowns. What are some of those things? You're like, guys, I can't believe this is out there. You would get more business if you did.
Yeah, it's such a long list. Yeah, so I am sounding so flip, and it's not right for me to do that. But the levity kind of just releases the tension a little. Let's talk about websites. Websites are it's a thing. It's definitely a thing. Now, it shouldn't be as big a thing. It should not be as big a thing. But I will tell you that I just had, and it's not the first time, a client say to me, I don't want to see that agency. I can't, their website is terrible. And the website is terrible, but the agency is great. I will not be able to convince her. Figure out how to market themselves. How will they figure out how to market us? Okay, so agencies are terrible. It's like saying the cobbler's kids have terrible shoes, so I'm not going to go to that cobbler. Cobbler, there's an old saying is there for a reason, right? So I'm so busy making you look good, I haven't had a chance to make myself look good. But it shouldn't be as big a thing, but it is a thing. So your website has got to be really good. Now, in terms of, let's get to people who are looking for stuff on your website, not people who just want to, I want to love the website. There are certain things that have to be on a website for me, or else I'm clicking the X in the corner and I'm moving on. So I've got to know, first of all, what kind of agency are you? If you tell me you are a transformation design agency, I don't know what the hell that is. Or ask me for one, no one ever was going to want one. I don't know what it is, but if you're really a creative agency, but you wanted to sound like something different, you just X'd yourself out of a chance to be a creative agency for my client, because I don't know what that is. And I have to be able to defend my recommendations to my client. So first of all, we call this frame of reference. What is your frame of reference as a client would see it? Clients have buckets. There's creative or advertising, full service agencies, there's digital agencies, there's social agencies, there's media agencies, there's PR agencies, and so on and so forth. Choose which one. You maybe you're a shopper agency. Tell me what you are. So get clear about what kind of agency you are. That's first. So if I can't tell what you are, I'm done. Also, make sure that you list your capabilities on your website. So if I'm looking for a social media agency or an agency to do social media for a company, I'm going to look at PR agencies, I'm going to look at digital agencies, and I'm going to look at purely social agencies. If I go onto a PR agency's website and they don't list social media, I am moving on if I don't know them, because I'm not even going to look at the case studies. I'm going to first look at their list of capabilities. So if they have great case studies on there, but they forgot to put in their capabilities list, I'm never getting that far. How much time am I going to spend on each one of these websites? Are you kidding? I got to look at hundreds of them. So your capabilities list has to be really great and clear. Clients, have a list of your current and past clients. Now, I like current and past because if, let's say, I'm doing a search for Nike and all your athletic shoe experience is past, this buys you great credibility, and current doesn't include them, you're not conflicted. Woohoo, I can include you. So current and past. Also, list your leadership or your whole agency if you're a small agency. Let me see who's doing the work. Bios with headshots. I don't need to see crazy kooky headshots where people have their dog instead of themselves. I want to know who's going to work on the business, and I want a short little resume of where they've worked before, what other agencies or what their big clients are that they've worked on. So it's like, wow, this guy worked on the creative campaign for Skittles. That's a big one. Okay, so I want to know what your resumes and your leadership team. I also want to see the diversity of your team. Are you an all male team? Are you a male and female team? Are you an all white team? These things matter. These things matter. So there's that. Also, what else do you like to see on a website? We have actually a checklist, an agency checklist for websites that we are happy to share. Things that folks should have on their websites. Say there are no case studies on the website for social media, but you won a social award. Now I've got a reason to believe, right? So you listed in your capabilities. I don't see any case studies, but you've got won social awards. Okay, now I'm going to ask you for case studies to prove it to me so I can recommend you. So the awards help there. So awards definitely help.
Now, everything that you've said, I'd like you to share, who you work with, right? Do you work with agencies on this? So if somebody has a problem, they could literally hire you and you go through all of this with them to their betterment.
Yeah, we work with agencies. So, it occurred to us several years ago, since we do, forgetting COVID, in a good year, we do somewhere between, let's say 15-ish searches in a year, maybe 18 in a year. We did less last year because of COVID, but we still did, I think 8 or 9 last year. But we maybe even more. I'm trying to think through. So we did way more than we thought we would in the beginning of the year when COVID first hit, but we still did. But it's still a tiny fraction of all of the searches that get done in a year. So as we sit and we watch agencies just kind of mess up, it's so heartbreaking to see them to lose for the wrong reasons. It's just so heartbreaking. We thought we should help agencies win because we are working on, there's all the other 98% of their searches are not Mercer Island Group run. So we started working with agencies, either on pitches. Sometimes we embed with an agency. If you've got a big pitch, like a really important one, like this one could be a game changer for us, we can embed and help you with the strategy work, take a look at your decks, help you set everything up right, proof everything, not proof, but look at, are you answering all the questions the way that they should be answered, all of that. So we can embed with you. But that's only if it's really a big pitch. But we also work with agencies kind of in a proactive way, evaluating websites for them, doing a full-blown evaluation and saying, okay, here's what we think you need to change and fix and work on. We can take a look at your past written submissions and say, okay, so here's why you didn't win. Here's what needs to change. We can look at your past pitch decks and say, okay, here's how we would reconfigure those going forward. We think you should do it this way. We can teach you how to do better strategy.
Really?
Yeah, we can. We actually figured out that was the one thing that agencies it's a really hard thing to learn. And we figured out how um, we kind of just, what's the best way to say it? We engineered it backwards, right? So what do we want to see and how would you get there? And we do strategic work for clients. So, we also do strategic consulting for clients that's separate from this agency matchmaking stuff. So we sat down and said, how do we get to great strategy for clients? And we just, I have a teaching background, right? So we were able to take it and pull it into an educational format where we could actually break it apart and teach people how to get to a competitive insight, a target audience insight, and a brand insight that then can lead to a big insight that then can become that strategy that I talked about earlier. So we teach agencies how to get to better strategy as well. So yeah, we do a whole bunch of stuff like that to help agencies on the proactive side kind of up their game so that when they do get asked, they're ready to go.
I love that. And before we go, is there anything that the world should know that we didn't cover?
I don't know if the world cares so much, but no, listen, I am. I am, as I said earlier, I'm really lucky enough to work with my husband. I actually, our daughter works for us and her husband as well.
Oh, wow.
So, and then we have several other folks also on our staff. So we're a family affair for real. I think one of my other daughters may come in at some point in the business too. I'm hoping. And the reason it's a family affair is because we love what we do and we care about the people we work with. When I moved away from the public sector and the nonprofit sector into the private sector, what motivated me in my life didn't change. And what motivates me in my life is to make the world better for my kids and my grandchildren. I think that's why I'm here. I think that's why we're all here. We're supposed to make the world better for each other and for the people who are going to be here after we leave. So how do I, nonprofit, that was easy. Even in the public sector, in the government space, that's pretty easy still to see. How do you do that in the private sector? And I think helping people love what they do, you go to work for a lot of hours every single day away from your family. You should love what you do and bring that energy to the people that you work with and bring that energy back home to the people that you live with. And so if I can help people love what they do more and feel satisfied in what they're doing and because they're able to achieve the objectives they have, that's a good day. And so I think if we all, it's a world of abundance. We don't have to be clawing at each other for everything. There's plenty for everybody. We just have to figure out how to make it work for all of us. And so that's the thing I'd leave you with, I guess.
No,
That's
I
what we
love
try
that.
to do.
And the last question is, how can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, so my email is robinb@migroup.com, and our website is I should know this migroup.com. I'm pretty sure is what we are right now. Yeah, migroup.com. We're actually about to do a new website, but I'm sure the address won't change. So migroup.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.